قد أفلح المؤمنون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Similar to what we did with Imam al-Hasan, Salamullahi alayhi, we are going to do a special episode, a special lecture regarding the wives and the children of Imam al-Husayn, Salamullahi alayhi. And this will serve as a nice part to his biography, inshallah. When we will have it complete, you will have a complete breakdown of his life, as well as a separate video about his wives and children. So with that being said, let us go ahead and get started. Let's just dive right into it. So the first wife of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn that we will be covering is Syeda Rubab Bint Imra al-Qais al-Kalbiyya. So Syeda Rubab Bint Imra al-Qais, her story is very interesting, and we sort of already went over it in the story of Imam al-Hasan's wife. Imam al-Hasan's also married a woman from Bani Kalb who was the sister of Rubab, and her name was, if I remember correctly, it was Zainab. Rubab bint Imra al-Qais, her story is very, very interesting, and her name is very well known, as in the majalis you always hear masa'ib about Rubab, and you always hear her name being recited in the maqtal of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn salamullahi alayhi. But who is Rubab bint Imra al-Qais? So Rubab is Bint Imra al-Qais ibn Adi al-Kalbi, who is the chief of Banu Kalb. And the account that I'm going to be sharing with you, it comes from the Kitab al-Aghani of Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani, as well as in Ansab al-Ashraf, which we went over in the event on Imam al-Hasan. So we read in Kitab al-Aghani in volume 16, page 93 to 94, he narrates the following story. He narrates that the father of Rubab, who was Imra al-Qais ibn Adi radhiyallahu ta'ala alayhi, he came to Medina during the early caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he was appointed by him as the emir over all of his tribesmen who would convert to Islam. And Abu al-Faraj notes this in Kitab al-Aghani. The person who narrates the story, he says, I have never seen anyone be given a banner, be made an emir, even though he had never prayed in his life. So he has this distinction as being one of the first people to be appointed as the emir over his people who had recently converted to Islam, even though he himself had not prayed yet. So Ali salamullahi alayhi, when Imra al-Qais al-Kalbi, when he was done speaking with Umar and he had been given his banner, because back then in Islamic history, whenever someone would be appointed a commander, we have a process called Aqd al-Liwa, where they would be given a banner. You would tie a banner for them, and that would symbolize their umara over their people. So, or their imara rather, over their people. So Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, Ali, caught up with him as he was preparing to leave Medina, and he proposed to him to establish marital ties. And so he agreed to give 3 of his daughters to Ali, al-Hasan and al-Husayn. And what I mean by that is that Imra al-Qais was saying, I'll give one of my daughters to Ali, one to al-Hasan, and one to al-Husayn. Salamullahi alayhi. And so we see that Rubab, ironically, is, and this is a fact that is not mentioned very much, is that she was a revert to Islam. She and her family, they were reverts to Islam from Christianity. So al-Husayn, salamullahi alayhi, he married Rubab. And in the later years of his khilafah, we read in Kitab al-Gharat by Shaykhuna al-Thaqafi, rahimahullah, he records that when Hujr ibn Adi al-Kindi, when he went to attack Muawiyah's Syrian territories, he went and met with Imra al-Qais ibn Adi. And he was called, the Sihr of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Ashar of al-Hasan wal-Husayn. He was going to attack Muawiyah, and so he stopped in Imra al-Qais' territory and asked him for directions. And so Imra al-Qais, of course, obliged him and helped him to carry out his raid. Abu al-Faraj also reports in page 95, and this is in Kitab al-Aghani, volume 16, page 95, he reports the following. He says that probably after Ali's death, Rubab, radhiyallahu ta'ala alayha, she gave birth to a daughter to Imam al-Husayn who is known as Amina, and who is popularly known as Sukayna or Sakina bint al-Husayn. The fact that her name was Amina, this was on page 93. Abu al-Faraj further reports on page 95, he has some akhbar regarding Sayyida Sukayna. And I wish to go over something really quickly. We won't dive too deeply into this, but there are some akhbar reports about Syeda Sukayna concerning her life and her personality after the death of Imam al-Husayn, and many of these come from Zubayr ibn Bakkar. And Zubayr ibn Bakkar, those of you who know Islamic history know that he's a major historian, and he mainly reports from his uncle. Well, you have to remember that this man was from al-Zubayr, and al-Zubayr were well known for their animosity towards the household of Ali. So I tried to avoid those reports, as, you know, there was something very unusual about them. I'd say the metan of some of these reports is very strange, and I did not think it would be appropriate to narrate them. However, there are a few akhbar about Sayyidah Sukayna that I would like to narrate. So Abu al-Faraj reports in volume 16, page 95. See here. He reports the following story about Sayyidah Sukayna. I think it's a very beautiful story. He says that once Sukayna was in a gathering that included one of the daughters of Uthman ibn Affan, who is an Umayyad woman. And as we know, Bani Umayyah, they did not like Bani Hashim. And so this daughter of Uthman wanted to do mufakhara. She wanted to, mufakhara in Arabic is where you try to, show off or take pride over someone else. Correct? So she went up to Sayyidah Sukayna and she said to her, "I am the daughter of the martyr." And so Sukayna, radhiyallahu ta'ala alayha, she fell silent. As in, this is the daughter of Uthman telling her, "I am the daughter of the martyr," because Uthman at that point, Bani Umayyah were pushing this narrative that he was a shaheed. Sukayna, it says, فَسَكَتَتْ Sukayna فَلَمَّا قَالَ الْمُؤَذِّنْ أَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. So when the mu'adhin cried out, that I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, قالت Sukayna, هَذَا أَبِي أَوْ أَبُوكِ. So she grabbed her and she said, "You hear that? Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Is that your father or mine? Is that your ancestor or mine?" And so the daughter of Uthman said, "Certainly I will never boast over you again." So we see that, in this Umayyad woman tried to, challenge Sayyidah Sukayna, tried to take pride over her, and she just wouldn't have it. And she refuted her in a magnificent way, we would say. There's another report, and he reports this on the same page. He says that Sukayna used to come behind the curtain on Fridays, standing near Khalid ibn Abd al-Malik ibn Harith ibn al-Hakam, and he was the governor of Medina at the time, and he would give khutbahs. And so when he ascended the pulpit, he insulted Imam Ali salamullahi alayhi. So when he did this, Sukayna and her maids would curse him, and he would then order the guards to beat her maids. And so we see that these reports show us that she was a very strong woman. She was obviously a woman who she's from Bani Hashim. She's the daughter of Abu Abdullah, the brother of an imam. And so these are just a few of the reports that show that she had a very strong personality. Now, regarding Sayyidah Sukayna, Ibn Sa'd reported in his Tabaqat in volume 6, page 400, as well as Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani in Kitab al-Aghani, page 92 to 93. He reports something very beautiful. He says that Al-Hasan, salamullah alayhi, according to Sukayna, it's narrated on her authority, Al-Hasan reproached al-Husayn for his excessive favors to Rubab. But in response, Al-Imam al-Husayn, salamullah alayhi, he declared his great love for her and Sukayna in 3 lines of poetry. And if we look at Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, I will read the first lines of it. لَعَمْرُكَ إِنَّنِي لَأُحِبُّ دَارًا تُضِيفُهَا سُكَيْنَةُ وَالرَّبَابُ أحبهما وأبذل بعد مالي وليس للئام فيها عتاب. Imam al-Husayn salamullah alayhi, this is something that many of you may have heard, but these are the sources for it, is that al-Husayn loved his wife Rubab and he loved his daughter Sukayna so much that he would write poetry for them. And this is something that is very wholesome, it's very beautiful. Because we know that many times in Islamic history when we hear about poets, they usually like to write about topics that are very inappropriate. But this shows us that writing poetry for your spouse, as long as it is respectful, as long as it is within the boundaries of Islam, is something praiseworthy, because this is what the Sibt, salamullah alayhi, shaheed, this is what he did for his family. So Rubab, radwanullahi ta'ala alayha, she also bore Imam al-Husayn his son Abdullah, who was still a child when he was killed at Karbala. And that incident is one that we will cover in the biography of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, and we will go over the sources for that as well. Rubab, to conclude, her 2 children with Imam al-Husayn were her daughter Sukayna and her young infant child Abdullah. It has been reported on the authority of Hisham ibn al-Kalbi This is Abu al-Faraj once again in Kitab al-Aghani in volume 16, page 94. He says the following. He says that Rubab was among the best and most noble of women. And after the killing of Imam al-Husayn, many men came to ask for her hand in marriage. But she said the following. She said, "Ma kuntu li'attakhidhu haman ba'da Rasulillah." So she says, I will never take any in-laws after Rasulullah. I'll never have another father-in-law after Rasulullah. So she's basically saying that I was married to Imam al-Husayn. I was married to the grandson of Rasulullah. Who could I possibly replace him with? Who could I possibly marry after his martyrdom? And so we further read, and this is on the same page, also narrated by Abu al-Faraj on the authority of Awan ibn al-Hakam. He says that after al-Husayn's death, Rubab recited the following poem. He said, "Inna alladhi kana nuran يستضاء به بكربلاء قتل غير مدفون صبط النبي جزاك الله صالحا عنا وجنبت خسران الموازين قد كنت لي قد كنت لي جبلا صعبا ألوذ به وكنت تصحبنا الرحم والدين من لليتامى ومن للسائلين ومن يغنى ويؤوى إليه كل مسكين والله لا أبتغي صهرا بصهركم حتى أغيب بين الرمل والطين." So this poem is very, very powerful, and we could say it is one of the oldest masa'ib for Aba Abdullah al-Husayn. And the translation of this poem is, "The one who used to be a light shining was killed in Karbala without a proper burial. The grandson of the Prophet, may Allah reward you for our behalf. The scales were spared from loss. You used to be like a difficult mountain for me to seek refuge in, and you used to accompany us with mercy and religion. Who is left for the orphans and those who ask, and those who enrich and would shelter every poor person? By Allah, I will not seek in-laws after you until I disappear between the sands and the mud." So this is Rubab Salamullahi alayha, her poem, as we saw earlier, al-Husayn wrote a poem for her, and this is her poem for him. And so Ali ibn al-Athir reports in Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh the fate of Syeda Rubab. He reports in volume 3, page 191, that Rubab radwanullahi ta'ala alayha lived only a year after Imam al-Husayn's martyrdom, and she passed away in Medina from sorrow over her husband's death. So that was the biography and just a nubdha, a bit of information about Syeda Rubab radwanullahi ta'ala alayha, and about her daughter Sukayna. Now, the next wife of Imam al-Husayn salamullahi alayh, his other spouse that we'll go over, is Layla bint Abi Murrah ibn Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafiyya radwanullahi ta'ala alayha. So Layla's biography, in order to understand who she is, we have to look at her lineage. We have to know where she comes from. So if we look at Kitab al-Isti'ab by Ibn Abdul Barr on page 564 to 565, and I believe in his book it is biography number 1913, he narrates that she was the daughter of Abi Murrah ibn Urwa ibn Mas'ud ibn Mu'attib from the Banu Thaqif tribe. And Banu Thaqif are a tribe that is very infamous in Islamic history. Some of their famous personalities include al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah and al-Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubayd al-Thaqafi and al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi, and among the companions of our Imams, Muhammad ibn Muslim al-Thaqafi, as well as Sahib Kitab al-Gharat, Shaykhuna Abi Ishaq Ibrahim ibn Muhammad al-Thaqafi, who's one of our early historians. So Banu Thaqif is a tribe of a long and rich history. And so it is reported in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, I will put this up on the screen for you guys, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with a da'if chain, it is narrated that during the siege of Ta'if, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of his Sahaba came to him. They said, "Ya Rasulullah, Banu Thaqif are showering us with their arrows. Please supplicate against them, make dua against them." So Rasulullah made the dua, "Allahumma hdi Thaqif," "Oh Allah, guide Thaqif." And so Sayyida Layla bint Abi Murrah is a Thaqafi woman, and she comes from one of the greatest families of Banu Thaqif. Her father Abi Murrah and her grandfather Urwa ibn Mas'ud were both Sahaba. And so this is recorded by Ibn Hajar in Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba, volume 7, page 306. He records that her father Abu Murrah ibn Urwa ibn Mas'ud, both him and his brother came to Rasulullah and they accepted Islam. So she was the daughter of a Sahabi and the granddaughter of a Sahabi. As for her grandfather Urwa ibn Mas'ud radwanullahi ta'ala alayh, he was a man of great standing within his people, both during Jahiliyyah and during Islam. So Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi rahimahullah, he was considered one of the great figures of the age, to the point where al-Walid ibn al-Mughira la'inahullah, he used to say if Allah would have sent a prophet, then it would have been a great man from Mecca or Ta'if. And this is referred to in the Quran, رَجُلٌ مِنَ الْقَرْيَتَيْنِ عَظِيمٌ. So when he says this, he says a man from the great cities, the cities in question here, and this is in Al-Quran al-Majid, in Surah 43, Ayah 31. We read the English translation for you guys. It says, and they said, why was it that this Quran was not sent down upon a great man from one of the two cities? This is referring to the fact that al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, he used to say, if Allah was going to send a prophet, it would have to be a great man, not a man like Muhammad. It would have to be a great man like me or Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. And this is something that most of the Mufassirin, from my research, agree upon. But for brevity's sake, we'll quote Tafsir al-Qummi on the authority of Imam Sadiq salamullah alayhi in volume 3, page 987 to 986, to 987. And again, you can check the other books of tafsir. They would say that this verse is in reference to Urwa ibn Mas'ud. So we see even in Jahiliyyah, he was considered a great man. He was considered a man of high standing. Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj reports with his sanad to Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, we see in Sahih Muslim number 167, regarding the merits of Urwa ibn Mas'ud, he says the following, that Rasulullah said, there appeared to me the apostles, and Musa alayhi salam was among men as he was among the people of Shanu'a, and I saw Isa alayhi salam ibn Maryam salamullahi alayhim, and I saw nearest in resemblance with him was Urwa ibn Mas'ud, ila akhir al-hadith. So according to this hadith, in Sahih al-Hadith, that Jabir narrates on the authority of Rasulullah that he was narrating to the companions what the Anbiya looked like. He said that Urwa ibn Mas'ud was similar in appearance to Nabiyuna Isa alayhi salam. Now, the story of Urwa ibn Mas'ud, the story of his martyrdom, is a very beautiful story. It's a very powerful story. And you could say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded this great man not only with martyrdom, but the honor of being an ancestor of one of the great shuhada of Karbala. So we read in the Seerah of Ibn Ishaq, and this is the English translation, in the life of Muhammad, it says the following, and it's narrated on the authority of Az-Zuhri. It says, they went to Urwa ibn Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. They sent him to the Apostle sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, O men of Quraysh, I have seen the harshness and the rude words with which you have received and those you sent to Muhammad when they returned to you. You know that you are the father and I am the son. For Urwa was the son of Subay'a ibn Abd Shams. I heard of what befell you and collected those of my people who obeyed me. Then I came to you to help you. So this is during the Sulh of Hudaybiyah, when Rasulullah was trying to conduct the peace treaty with the Mushrikeen. So Urwa ibn Mas'ud, even though he wasn't from Quraysh, he was from Banu Thaqif, he decided to step in. He decided to help Quraysh negotiate. And so the report continues, they agreed and said that they did not suspect him. So he came to the apostle and sat before him and said, Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, have you collected a mixed people together and then brought them to your own people to destroy them? Quraysh have come out with their camels in leopard skins, swearing that you shall never enter Mecca by force. By God, I see you will be deserted by these people tomorrow. Now, Abu Bakr was sitting behind the Prophet, and he says something that I cannot say here. He asked who had spoken, and when I heard who it was Ibn Abi Quhafa. And he said, by Allah, did I not owe you a favor that I would pay you back for that? But now we have quit. Then he began to take hold of the apostle's beard as he talked to him. Now, this is something really interesting. It's like this part of the report says that as Urwa ibn Mas'ud was speaking to Rasulullah, he had grabbed him by his beard. And so someone asked the question, why? Why would he do this? So I've heard some scholars report, and this is also mentioned in the Quran, that Nabi Musa grabbed his brother Harun by his beard or by the hair on his head. And this isn't necessarily out of disrespect, as in among some people of the past, perhaps Banu Thaqif, this was a way of conveying to someone, like, I care about you and I want you to listen closely to what I'm saying. So when he did this, the report continues that al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah was standing by the apostle's head and he began to hit his hand as he held the apostle's beard and said, take your hand away from the apostle's face before you lose it. Urwa said, how rough and rude you are. The apostle smiled when Urwa asked who the man was, and he told him it was his brother's son-in-law, Mughira ibn Shu'bah. And he said, O wretched man, it was only yesterday that I washed your dirty parts. So this report is in reference to the story of how Mughira ibn Shu'bah, how he left the Ta'if and he converted to Islam, which is a story we will try to report if we do a biography on him separately. Continuing on, the apostle told him what he had told the others, namely that he had not come out for war. He got up from the apostle's presence, seeing how his companions treated him. Whenever he performed his ablution, his wudu, they ran to get the water that he had used. If he spat, they ran to it. If a hair of his beard fell, they ran to pick it up. So he returned to Quraysh and said the following words, and these are very, very powerful. He said, I have been to Kisra in his kingdom, and Caesar, Qaisar in his kingdom, and Najashi in his kingdom, but I have never seen a king among a people like Muhammad among his companions. I have never seen a people who will never abandon him for many reasons, so form your own opinion. So he says to Quraysh, says, I met with Muhammad and I saw for myself the men he's surrounded by. Good luck dealing with him. You're not going to be able to hold him back if he intends to come here. So later, when Rasulullah besieged the city of Ta'if, Urwa ibn Mas'ud, rahimahullah, came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he accepted Islam. And he sought permission to return to his people. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to him, I fear they may kill you. As in he's telling Rasulullah, let me go talk to my people, let me talk to the people of Ta'if, and perhaps I can try to convert them. So Rasulullah said, I fear that they might kill you. And so Urwa replied, if they found me asleep, they would wake me up. Which is saying that I trust them, I think they would at least hear me out. So Rasulullah granted him permission, so Urwa returned to his people as a Muslim. When he arrived, he came in the evening, and the people of Thaqif came to him. He invited them to Islam, but they accused him, opposed him, and made him hear what he had not expected. When the night passed and the dawn broke, Urwa stood in his house and he called for prayer. When he began to say the Shahada, an unknown man from Thaqif shot an arrow at him and killed him. And so regarding this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the example of Urwa is like the example of the companion of Yasin who invited his people to Allah, but they killed him. And this is reported in a few sources. It's reported in al-Mustadrak al-Sahihain by al-Hakim, in volume 3, page 713, hadith number 6579. It has also been reported by az-Zuhri as reported in al-Mu'jam al-Kabir, volume 17, page 147 to 148. Hadith number 374 to 375. And it was graded Hasan by al-Haythami in Majma' al-Zawad. It has also been reported, the story of his martyrdom and Rasulullah's words regarding him have also been reported in his biography in al-Isti'ab. So we see that Sayyida Layla, ta'ala alayha, her grandfather was a shaheed and a great man, a man who was of high standing in Jahiliyyah, and he converted to Islam and he called his people to Islam and he was martyred. And so Rasulullah compared him to the believer of Ali Yasin, who invited his people to Islam, but they instead of joining Islam, they killed him. And so as for Layla's mother, we already said her father is the son of Urwa, who is Abi Murrah ibn Urwa ibn Mas'ud. Her mother is a lady by the name of Maymuna, who was the daughter of Abu Sufyan, and she was from Bani Umayyah. And she was known as Shayba. And this is reported in Maqatil al-Talibiyin by Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani on page 86. This is why when you read about Ali al-Akbar, salamullahi alayhi, is often brought up by the Khutaba, is that he had some relation to Yazid, la'inahullah. So Yazid is, he's Yazid ibn Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And Ali al-Akbar, his mother, is Maymuna bint Abi Sufyan. So him and Yazid were related, they were cousins. And so during the Battle of Karbala, there are reports that indicate that they tried to tell him, join us, you have a blood relationship with the Emir, with Yazid ibn Muawiyah. You are related to the Khalifa. If you join us, then we won't harm you. And so Ali al-Akbar, salamullahi alayhi, in his famous lines of poetry, he rebuked them and said that we, the household of the Prophet, are worthier of rule than the sons of the Da'i. Correct? However, regarding Maymuna, there is no reliable information about her presence at Karbala. So we know that, we know that Layla, there are reports that say that she, there are reports about her marriage to Imam al-Husayn. We know who her son is, obviously. But regarding Layla's presence, I think there's a difference of opinion regarding her presence at Karbala. And lastly, so that's to say the Layla. So far we've covered Syeda Rubab, we've covered Syeda Layla. Now we will cover the last wife of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, the last spouse of Abu Abdullah, and that is Syeda Shahrbanu. And there's a lot of disagreement among regarding Syeda Shahrbanu, and we will go show you some of these reports. So we read in al-Kafi al-Sharif, and this is reported by Thiqat al-Islam Kulayni in al-Kafi, in volume 1, in his chapter on Imam al-Sajjad, salamullah alayh, in volume 1, book 4, chapter 117, hadith 1, as well as in Kitab Basa'ir al-Darajat by Shaykhuna al-Saffar, rahimahullah, page 374 to 375. He reports the following. He says, and this is narrated on the authority of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. He says, when the daughter of Yazdajird was brought before Umar, the girls of Medina wanted to see her. When she entered the mosque, it became all delightful and bright. And when Umar looked at her, she covered her face and said in her own language, and she said something in Old Farsi, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but the English translation is, may the life of Hormuz turn black. So Umar asked, is she abusing me? And he wanted her. So Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam said to him, Ali said to Umar ibn al-Khattab, that is not for you. Give her the chance to choose whoever of the Muslims she likes, and then count it as his share of the booty. So he allowed her to choose, and she came all the way to and placed her hand on the head of al-Husayn alayhi salam. So Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam asked her, what is your name? So she said, my name is Jahan Shah. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam said, in fact, it is Shahrbanu. He then said to al-Husayn alayhi salam, O Abu Abdullah, she will give birth to a son for you who will be the best of the inhabitants of the earth. She later gave birth to Ali ibn al-Husayn al-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi. And Shaykh al-Kulayni, rahimahullah, commented, Ali ibn al-Husayn was called the son of the two best. The chosen from the Arabs was the tribe of Hashim, and from the non-Arabs was the Persians. As in, among the Arab, the greatest family, the greatest household was considered to be Bani Hashim. And among the non-Arabs, the greatest race of people, the greatest group was considered the Persians, the house of Sasan, the Sasanian dynasty. So it is narrated that Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, who's a tabi'i, a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is famous for his role in transmitting Arabic grammar, he narrated a poem. He said, a boy from Kisra and Hashim, the most noble one on whom sacred symbols are stitched for safety. Shaykhuna al-Saduq, rahimahullah, reports a similar report in Uyun Akhbar al-Rida, and this is in volume 2, book 1, chapter 5, hadith number 4. So he reports that Sahl ibn al-Qasim I don't know how to pronounce his name, al-Noshajani, said, in Khurasan, al-Rida told me that there are ties of kinship between you and me. So I asked, O master, how is that? So al-Rida said, when Abdullah ibn Amr ibn Quraysh conquered Khurasan, he captured two of the daughters of Yazdajird, the Persian king, and sent them to Uthman ibn Affan. He granted one of them to al-Hasan and the other one to al-Husayn. They both died during childbirth. So this report, as we see, is a little different. This report says that it wasn't during the time of Umar that this lady was brought to the Muslims and married to Abu Abdullah, but rather it was during the time of Uthman. Shaykh al-Mufid reported the following regarding Imam Ali ibn al-Husayn, and this is in Kitab al-Irshad in volume 2, page 139. He reports the following. His mother was Shah Zanan, daughter of Yazdajird bint Shahrayar ibn Kisra. Her name was also said to be Shahrbanu. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam had appointed Hurayth ibn Jabir al-Hanafi over part of the eastern provinces. The latter sent him two daughters of Yazdajird ibn Shahrayar ibn Kisra. Of these he had given his son al-Husayn, Shah Zanan, and she bore him Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. He had given the other to Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, and she bore him al-Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. So that these two, Imam Zayn al-Abidin and al-Qasim, were maternal cousins. So this report, once again, we see another version. This time it wasn't during Umar's caliphate or Uthman's caliphate, but rather it was during the caliphate of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Lastly, al-Yaqubi, in Tarikh al-Yaqubi, volume 2, page 229, reported the following. He says, her name was Harab, but she was given to al-Husayn alayhi salam during the caliphate of Umar, and he named her Ghazala. He also reported that the noblemen of Quraysh would see Ali ibn al-Husayn and wish that their mothers were slave girls as well. And so this is a testament to the greatness of Imam al-Sajjad, salamullah alayhi, that people would see him and they would say, his mother was a slave girl. But look at his akhlaq, look at his knowledge, look at his character. I wish my mother was a slave girl as well, if that's the result of marrying a jariyah. So, in conclusion, we say, while the details of her life may be contradictory, there seems to be a consensus that she was a Persian lady from the Sasanian royal family. Even though these reports are contradictory, they do agree on that fact that she was from the royal family of the Persians. When al-Husayn alayhi salam married her, the time at which he married her and what her actual name was are a matter of dispute. But in any case, we conclude that she was indeed a noble lady, and may Allah be pleased with her. We give thanks to Allah that we are on the wilayah of her son, Imam Sayyid al-Abidin, Imam Sajjad salamullahi alayh, and of course, Allah knows best. With that being said, we are going to bring this event to a close. And let me know if you want me to. I don't think we will be able to do this with all of the Imams because many of them, when it comes to information on their spouses, is very scarce. But inshallah, we will do a video going over the wives of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali alayhi salam. We'll go over some of them, such as Syeda al-Baneen, salamullahi alayha. With that being said, we'll bring this to a close. We ask you to please keep us in your dua, and we'll end this lecture with salawat, تسبقها سورة الفاتحة rather تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على